In 2012, autism researcher Damian Milton coined the double empathy problem. Most simplistically, his proposition is that a lot of the social difficulties that autistics are facing are due to a lack of understanding between autistics and non-autistics. Basically, he says that autistics are better at socializing with autistics, and non-autistics are better at socializing with non-autistics. And I would say that he's right. If you have ever observed level 1 adult autistics interact with each other, they seem to socialize much more smoothly than when they're trying to socialize with the non-autistics. And as a non-autistic myself, even a non-autistic who has a lot of experience socializing with level 1 autistics, I can clearly say that there's a lot less friction when I'm socializing with other non-autistics. It's easier to socialize with other non-autistics as a non-autistic. When there's a lack of difference between the way the brains are interacting socially, socializing is smoother. So in a sense, Milton is saying that neurodiverse socializing is a lot more difficult. It is. And I know that part of the problem is that non-autistics are projecting the way that their brain works onto autistics and assuming that autistics understand the social world the way that they do, and that projection causes a lot of problems. And the reason why I know this is because I did that for years. I was married to an autistic man for a little over 20 years, and during that time, I spent a lot of time projecting my brain onto his, assuming that his brain functioned the way mine did. And honestly, all that did was cause me and him a lot of grief and pain. Now, of course, I didn't know that he was autistic. I didn't know anything about autism, but I can certainly say that my role as a non-autistic had an impact on the way our interactions happened. And I really believe that we will all get along a lot better as the non-autistics understand how their own brain works, and therefore how the autistic brains around them work, and vice versa as much as possible. Milton's reasoning has been extended to the concept of empathy, and studies have been done trying to discover if autistics empathize with other autistics more easily than they empathize with non-autistics. And there have been some mixed results, but it makes sense that autistics would have more empathy for people with whom they can really comprehend, and that therefore they would have more empathy for other autistics than non-autistics. Yet my hypothesis, at least, is that any higher level of empathy that autistics may have for other autistics doesn't change the mechanisms of the emotion sharing empathy or the body empathy. And through really understanding the differences between emotion sharing empathy and body empathy, we can cultivate family systems and communities where there's more understanding of each other. Milton is also certainly pushing back against the idea of theory of mind deficits and broken, impaired mirror neuron systems, and looking for language and acknowledgement that makes autistics equal. In his words, he's, quote, reframing such issues as a question of reciprocity and mutuality. In other words, he's saying, I think, come on, non-autistics, you need to take some responsibility for what's going wrong here. As a high-body empathetic who grew up in a neurodiverse family among a lot of neurodiverse communication and neurodiverse conflict, and who actually took a lot of responsibility for what was going on, maybe even too much responsibility for what was going on, all the while the autistics had very little comprehension of the emotional labor that I was putting into it, or how I was smoothing things over and making sure that the family stayed as peaceful as possible. I'm not sure that the notion that non-autistics need to take more responsibility is going to move us towards a solution that will support these neurodiverse families. But I do think, as an adult, now that I understand my own brain and the differences between my brain and the brains of the level 1 autistics in my family, that I can understand how some of the actions that I took in my family were actually contributing to the problems. And I can be more self-aware of that and make changes in my behaviors in order to alleviate the suffering of everyone. and that is actually a really beautiful way to look at the situation. And what I love about Milton's reframing is that it can help us get there. But in order to get there, we need a neurodiverse family systems framework and a comprehension of the differences between our brains.